structure is called?
Oh.
Was it a pyramid?
A renal pyramid, yes.
A renal pyramid, yeah.
In between one renal pyramid and the next renal pyramid is this area of tissue, called a what?
Minor.
A renal column. So basically, you've got pyramid, column, pyramid, column, pyramid. Hey,
How you doing?
pretty good.
Right.
You're more than welcome to sit down. We're going over the urinary model.
Right, I would love to. Kind of pressed for time,
Okay, yeah.
so I just came to...
All right, so yeah, we've got renal pyramids, renal columns. The whole idea of why we have these columns is that it's a way to get our blood vessels out and back from the cortex. Because the filtration of blood that's part of making urine all happens out here in the cortex, and so that's how we get the blood out there.
Oh, so you didn't mention the cortex. You said the capsule is the thing surrounding it, and then the cortex
Is the outer layer.
Okay.
So now the thing is, the pyramids and the columns both collectively make what layer?
Oh, this thing here.
Yep, all of this is called the what?
Medullary?
The medullary layer or medulla, exactly. Yep. So the outer lighter layer is the cortex. The inner darker layer, made of pyramids and columns, is the medulla.
It's like the brain.
Exactly, right? And also like, say, the adrenal glands. Adrenal cortex, adrenal medulla. Cortex and medulla just mean outer layer and inner layer. All right, so let's see. Other things that could be asked on this portion of the model would be the spaces. What do you call a space that drains urine from a single pyramid? Yeah, minor calyx. So the smallest of these compartments, like here and here, are minor calyces. The thing is, the idea is that eventually a couple of these minors make a larger space, like right here. And now this is going to be receiving urine from multiple pyramids. So we now change it to major calyx, exactly.
C-A-L-I-X?
C-A-L-Y-X. Eventually, a couple of these major calyxes come together to make one big open space in the middle of the kidney here.
It's not the hip, it's the
Renal pelvis.
renal pelvis.
Exactly, yeah. It's exactly like a pelvic bone, hip bone, yeah. And that renal pelvis is what eventually tapers into a tube known as ureter, exactly. There's also a name given to this just generally indented space of a kidney. There's also that of a lung. That's like an indentation where blood vessels come in and out. It can be spelled two different ways. Hilum or hilus. H-I-L-U-S or H-I-L-U-M. What we can also see is that every pyramid has like a bump at the tip of it. The thing is, what's interesting is that these bumps are named for being nipple-shaped, which is kind of a weird analogy to use. But why that actually makes sense is that we've seen that before in A&P1. There are things called dermal papillae, hair papillae, and now there's a renal papilla, where a papilla is just a bump-shaped or literally protruding structure. The whole idea of those pyramids is that inside one of these the whole idea of one of these papillae here is that they're riddled with a series of little holes. Inside a pyramid is a whole bunch of these things called collecting ducts that collects urine, hence their name. And those collecting ducts will drain that urine into these spaces, and it's those spaces that then take that urine out of the kidney and down toward the bladder. So the thing is, the reason that these papillae here are riddled with a bunch of little holes is that the urine coming through these pyramids almost like filters out into the spaces through the little holes of the papillae, and then that urine can be collected and moved down toward the bladder.
Is the papillae more for like regulating flow too, so it just doesn't come? Okay.
Yeah. It's just like the mechanism by which it streams out of the pyramid and into the spaces. Okay. Yes. The question is, if the whole idea then of a pyramid is to just gather together the urine and send it to the spaces, there's got to be then stuff going on out here in the cortex that is producing the urine, and that's because of nephrons. the kidney is not one big filter. The kidney is actually a million little filters, where each of those million little filters is one of these long beige structures known as a nephron. One thing to be aware of on this model is that it's not exactly anatomically correct. What I mean by that is notice that we've got these round things that are called renal corpuscles, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But they only show 2 of the nephrons. Well, every one of these should have all these tubes coming out of them. But if they had all 12 tubes for all 12 corpuscles here, there'd be tubes everywhere, and you could barely trace then one of the tubes. So rather than show the tubes for all 12, they're showing just 2 of them. Notice how they look different. The tube for this one is shorter and starts further up, and the tube for this one is much longer and the corpuscle sits further down. When you've got a long tube that comes deeper into the medulla, this one is called... There are 2 different types of nephrons, cortical and juxtamedullary. Based on their positions, which one makes sense to be called cortical? The one further in the cortex, this one. Which one makes sense to be called juxtamedullary? The one that falls further into the medulla. So if I ever asked, what type of nephron is this? What type of nephron is that? You've got a cortical and you've got a juxtamedullary.
But there is an efferent and afferent something.
But those are vessels, yes, blood vessels.
Not like this?
Yes, but they're the red structures, not the beige tubes. Afferent and efferent will refer to the blood vessels that come into and out of one of these capillary beds. All right, so the next thing we want to be able to do to understand how these nephrons work, and I went over this in our lab last night, is that blood in a capillary bed is going to leak out what is called filtrate. All it really is plasma, but when that plasma comes leaking out of this capillary bed, it's caught by the beige tube, the nephron, and that is then going to be filtered. What's interesting is that when the blood plasma comes leaking out of this blood vessel, series of blood vessel capillaries here, what comes leaking out is things of value and things that are waste. So leaking out of this batch of blood vessels here, you're going to get water, glucose, sodium, potassium, amino acids, and and then waste like uric acid, urea, creatinine, things that are called metabolic wastes. Well, the thing is, when you produce urine, would it be very beneficial to put into that urine glucose, amino acids, sodium, potassium, and a lot of water? No, because you have to work pretty hard to get those things into your body, so you don't want to just literally urinate them away. So, the whole reason that this fluid leaks out is that, okay, let's take everything out of the blood, things that are valuable like nutrients and things that are waste. Why then does this fluid pass through this long tubule of the nephron? To give it time to take back the things of value. Because wrapping around these tubes will be different capillary beds, and those capillary beds do something called reabsorption. They reabsorb the glucose, they reabsorb the amino acids, they reabsorb the sodium and potassium and a lot of the water, and that way what ends up in a collecting duct? Not glucose and amino acids and sodium
Waste.
and potassium. At that point, it's just waste. So the whole idea of leaking the plasma is to get everything out. But then we take back the things of value, so what's left at the end is just waste.
And then what's going through this side at the whatever? What's going through there? The stuff that we're keeping?
And through where, I'm sorry?
What's it called? The whatever?
The two different, this type of nephron?
What's coming, like, over here is the waste,
Mhm.
right? What's going through here?
Well, no, okay. Through these beige tubules, the
Everything.
nephron is where everything is going through, and our blood is taking back what's of value.
Okay.
So, what ends up finishing off going to the collecting duct is just waste.
Oh, I see. It's starting over here.
The filtration starts in all of these structures and
Mhm.
ends at the collecting duct. Along the way, capillary beds have taken back the nutrients, and what's left in the tubule is just the waste.